Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today, we are going to take a look at a few upcoming transits this week and unpack them for you. We're also going to take a look at this last quarter moon that's happening today and into tomorrow. You'll be feeling it. So, a few things to take a look at. Before I dive in, I want to remind all of you that I'm in the last 40 days of the year. I'm doing fundraising for the year ahead. So if you enjoy this channel, if you subscribe to it, like it, share videos, you get something good out of it, even somewhat regularly throughout your year. There's a lot that goes into the creation of this content, and I would love to have your support for another year of content ahead. So our goal this year is to get to 691 backers, which is one more than we did last year. Just see if we can beat our record from last year. We're well on our way already. As of the time I'm making this, we're at about 519. So we're closing in on matching last year. We're off to a great start. I want to show you the Kickstarter page. You can find the link in the comment section or description of this video today. And here's what you can do when you donate. You'll see that you can pledge and receive a reward. I'll just give you a little breakdown of what you can get. When you pitch in and support my work in 2021, you can pick up a mantra meditation video at the $25 pledge level, and then they go up from there. There's an Astrology of 2021 video. You'll hear me break down January of 2021, and you'll hear me mention, of course, some of what I think the big highlights are going to be around the beginning of January. But the actual in-depth analysis of the Astrology of 2021 is something I only make available through the Kickstarter, just something to offer an incentive for people who support my work in the year ahead. I've also got a special talk on predicting with and understanding eclipses. I also have a year ahead horoscope reading. If you want to get a breakdown of what to expect for your sun or rising sign for the year ahead, I have a breakdown for all 12 signs, and I'll send you whichever one you want, your sun or rising. And that's a really nice in-depth forecasting reading that you can pick up. I have another talk that I did on melancholy and the mystical Saturn. This is an expanded talk on Saturn and how to understand Saturn, especially in your own birth chart. There's a Nodes of the Moon workshop, which is a few parts on how to read and interpret the nodes of the moon through the lens of ancient astrology, both sort of ancient Western and Indian astrology. Then I have there's only 39 of these left, which is a personalized mini reading that I do where I look at your chart and I tell you what I think your biggest transit of 2021 is going to be. So there's only a few of those left. Then there's Ask 3 Horary questions. You can, it's a discount on my horary readings, essentially. You can ask 3 horary questions anytime you want during the year. And then the best reward that I offer really is half off to all of my classes. My wife has her herbal apprenticeship for sale, and then you can combine my classes if you want to take my year 1 and 2, or if you're in my year 1 and you want to take year 2 in horary, my advanced classes, you can combine all of this stuff. So that's what I've got. Thank you so much, everyone who's already chipped in. Like I said, we're off to a really great start. We've got, I think like 160 or something left to get there. So let's see what we can do. All right, so I'll go ahead and dive in. I'm going to bring up the real-time clock and tell you guys what's going on this week and what to expect. So we come into this week as the last quarter moon is shaping up. It's in Virgo right now, making an aspect to the sun in Sagittarius. So this is something that'll perfect today. You can still feel it into tomorrow. You should have been feeling it yesterday. And it represents it's not just a normal last quarter moon. It's a last quarter moon that is bringing to conclusion we're in the middle of eclipse season, is what I'm trying to say. And a last quarter moon during eclipse season is bringing things to conclusion. Last quarter moons do that. They tend to bring dissolution and the surrendering or releasing of a cycle. These release points are huge when you're in the midst of eclipse season. So some deeper forms of releasing and processing things right now, finishing things, completing things. This is the mature and realized fruit of a lot deeper karmic cycle because we're in the middle of eclipse season. So you're going to feel that, and you can look to, especially the house that contains Virgo in your chart. For example, we're closing on the sale of our house today back in Maryland. That's in the 5th house in my chart, right? The 5th whole sign house. and that is the second from the fourth. So in ancient astrology, that's related to profits from your property, profits from land or property. So, we'll sell our house today. So that's good news. Yay. But that last quarter moon is going to, it acts as the harvest of a deeper cycle, not all of which is always easy. So you want to watch for that energy today, especially into tomorrow. You should still be able to feel it as well, and you could have been feeling it yesterday on Sunday. Now, I wanted to start with that because obviously the other thing that's going to happen by the end of the week on the 14th, there's solar eclipse. So we've got a solar eclipse coming in the sign of Sagittarius, and that's going to present us with a very powerful new beginning. And this new beginning is born of the cycle that's coming to a close right now. So you might be feeling this transition this week and into next week in a much broader sense anyway, because of the newness that's coming on the heels of this lunar cycle, which featured a lunar eclipse in Gemini. Okay, so that is a little bit about the lunation cycle and where we're at. We'll be doing more with the eclipse later. For now, the other transit that I want to focus on is the transit between the Sun and Neptune, which is perfecting in the next couple of days. So I'll just give you a picture. Here's the perfection of that transit by Wednesday of this week. And you're going to see the full effects coming through all the way, you could say, until Friday into Saturday of this week, because you give it about 3 degrees on either side. In my experience, that range, which ancient astrologers use, is really the best. So you have a Sun-Neptune square. Now, as that is happening simultaneously, the sun is making a trine to Mars. So you have this kind of simultaneous Sun-Neptune, Sun-Mars dynamic. What to watch for here? Well, I think it's also interesting in the background that Mercury is is really getting burnt up under the beams of the sun, is in its detriment, is going into conjunction with the south node of the moon. This is a very otherworldly Mercury, and could potentially fall prone could fall prey to some of the more challenging dimensions of the south node, which have some resonance with Neptunian issues as well. Like there's something in common there. When Mercury hits the south node of the moon, it can become very otherworldly, and sometimes also point towards deception, escapism, illusion, and things like that. So when Neptune's moving into the square with Mercury, when Mercury's moving into the square with Neptune, the sun is moving into the square with Neptune. Mercury's burnt up under the beams of the sun, hitting the south node. There's some potential for the rational mind, right, represented by Mercury, to be overwhelmed by Neptunian things right now. It's also possible that that there is some mystical states of consciousness or awareness that come through this that aren't necessarily negative either. So I'm gonna stop sharing now, and let's just try to break it down one at a time, starting with the Sun Neptune, which is probably the most pronounced of all of these transits. First of all, you've got the sun, which is a planet in ancient astrology that is related to spirit, to the underlying consciousness, that inhabits all of the different forms, whether it's my dog or, myself or my kids or, the squirrels out in my yard or whatever. Every being has indwelling spirit, indwelling soul. And in ancient astrology, the sun was sort of philosophically related to that idea of the indwelling spirit within all things. And it's connected in this world to the idea behind the sun is that the sun, the spirit is always in motion, that life is naturally moving and doing things, and that it does things according to its desires, or sometimes we would also say its intentions, but its intentions are related to its desires or its aversions, what it doesn't want. And that's what compels us to act and take different kinds of actions. The sun was related to spirit, and the spirit also was related to the daimon, which is also kind of a combination between a kind of ideal image toward which action is being driven toward, like the desires that compel the protagonist in a movie or a play or a novel. But it's this kind of ideal image that we're moving toward. It's our desired end. Destiny is connected to this word in a sense. Or destiny is a word that's connected to this. But on the other hand, it's also, the daimon is sort of a kind of a spirit that guides us or brings us along the way, like a compass, always pointing us in the direction that we're trying to go. Now, this could be overarching in the sense of an entire lifetime, or it could be more contained to say the desires you have on any given day, or, a week or something like that. So, it's has varied applications in time. But this sense of everything moving according to what it desires, and that there's ideal images that are motivating the desires. This is what the sun is related to, and this is why the sun is so closely linked to reputation, status, fame, notoriety in the world, mastery, power, rank, and as well as the idea that I'm going to go and do something according to some lofty, perfect ideal that I wish for, that I long for. So the sun is kind of on a mundane level gets filtered in, and is often then related to the peak state that we wish to reach in some area of our life. If you have the sun in the 7th house, for example, maybe the peak state has something to do with other people or a marriage. If it's in the 10th house, maybe it has more to do with career. If it's in the 1st house, maybe it has to do more with self-image. You see what I mean? So it can really vary. Our actions, our motivations are really diverse. But the other thing is that alchemically speaking, the sun is also related to the ideal of all ideals, which is divinity and love of Godhead, or the aspiration to enlightenment, to realizing our own nature, which is the only image that finally satisfies the God within us. And so there's this spectrum of ways that the sun can be understood in ancient astrology, and it's kind of the alchemical gold. But also, on a very mundane level, it's about reputation, the things we're trying to achieve, or the actions we're trying to take according to the desires that we have. So now pair that planet with Neptune, which we're going to see over the course of this week in a square. Now, squares are of the nature of Mars, so you get a Mars flavor to the Sun-Neptune contact, and then the sun is going to be trine to Mars in Aries, and they're both in fire signs. So you're getting a lot of action. The idea between Sun and Neptune and Sun and Mars this week is action. And to a certain extent, the trine and Neptune in the mix soften the Mars element quite a bit. But this is about action, will, strength, courage, determination, potentially conflict or hostility, or having to overcome things with a certain bravado or courage along the way, standing up for what you believe, sacrificing something. These are Mars. Remember, Mars, the word Mars related to martyr, and Mars was also related to the 6th house, which was associated with selfless service and sacrifice, as in a military soldier who gives their life to the nation or something like that. So there's this, I'm going to lay my life down. I'm going to put myself on the line. It's very heroic, right? So there's that energy toning this week's connection. Really important to mention that before we talk about Neptune, because Neptune's going to kind of take us into another world here in a second. So a lot of the motivation of this week has to do with action, courage, bravery, assertiveness, conquering things, overcoming things. And as it's doing so, the sun is going to be connecting with Neptune, which is this planet that it's an outer planet that represents, you could say, the impulse to dissolve separativeness into oneness, or it's related to the impulse to towards union and towards boundarylessness and towards the imaginal and towards fantasy, as well as towards Neptune can bring up illusion, delusion, intoxication, escapism, and things like that. Most people are familiar with all of this if you know a bit about astrology. So how do these combine with this kind of, remember the trine from the sun to Mars is of the nature of Jupiter, and the nature of the aspect between the sun and Neptune is of the nature of Mars. So you're getting a lot of kind of it feels very knightly. It's sort of chivalrous and honorable, and it has uh, a quality of someone crusading with a sacred vision or a sacred sense of righteousness behind them, and kind of could be very effective week in terms of like actions and so forth. But remember that Neptune can create these delusions of grandeur. Neptune can be very intoxicating. Mercury under the beams of the sun can also be sort of deceptive and can throw logic or rationality out the window. And so you do have to be careful of those things in the mix. But here's some of the ways you may see the two combine. When we have a feeling that there is an otherworldly or higher purpose that suddenly replaces the more mundane level of purpose that we feel like we've been working with, that's oftentimes a sign that you're getting into a Sun-Neptune transit. Could be in your natal chart too. You have Neptune transits the sun in your natal chart. It's often like that. There can be this very peaceful quality. It's almost like if you've ever looked at the reflection of the sun in a beautiful, summer lake, or if you've been in the ocean, and that some of the places in the world where the water's just like crystal blue, and it's like crystal, or it's crystal clear, and it's kind of blue, or it's blue, and then you see the white sand beaches, and the sun is just, it's like sparkling. That's very Sun-Neptune. So watch for that kind of feeling or that kind of energy this week. Very very radiant quality. Imagination, watch for the imaginal impulse to rise and to become possessed by a sense of needing to act upon it. The sense that creation is permeated with God or spirit or gods, or that the imaginal realm is somehow, you can almost touch it. It's so close. See, those are Sun-Neptune qualities. As well, we can see potential for illusions of grandeur, delusions, deception, escapism. Sometimes there's also going to be a lack of confidence or certainty about which direction to go in, the feeling of being overwhelmed. It's kind of like the beginning line of that Walt Whitman poem, which I think the first time I heard was through Dead Poets Society. What good amidst these, oh me, oh life, Oh, how did the rest of it go? Of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amidst these, oh me, oh life. And then what is the answer that Walt Whitman gives? He says that you exist, and identity, that you have a role to play, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. It's very Sun-Neptune, all of that, right? Not surprisingly, when I was a kid and I first saw that movie, there was Sun-Neptune contact in my life, in my chart through Sun was in Capricorn, and it was opposing my Sun and Mercury. So Dead Poet Society is actually a really good Sun-Neptune movie in a lot of ways, come to think of it, because there's also the father who disapproves of imagination. And one thing that the Sun-Neptune can bring up is, in the movie, one of the main characters' fathers really disapproves of him wanting to study poetry and be an artist and an actor. Well, I think it was more that he disapproved of him being an actor. And so that the young man takes his own life. Sorry to spoil it if you haven't seen Dead Poet Society. By now, if you haven't seen it, I don't feel bad. So anyway, he takes his own life, and that's a Sun-Neptune thing as well. This feeling of, what good is it? What good? What good is there? I can't. This world is too mundane. This world is not good enough. So there's this desire to fly away that can come with the Sun and Neptune, or tragic losses of fathers or solar figures, or healing related to father figures, the need for something more transcendent. Sun Neptune can represent in a birth chart a father figure who was, this larger than life imaginal figure, but also perhaps somewhat complex. Was our father, if you have a really romantic image of your father, it's probably because on some level there were really romantic and imaginative dimensions, or spiritual dimensions, or artistic dimensions to your father, or really sensitive, subtle dimensions. That's Sun Neptune stuff. But on the other hand, sometimes the Sun Neptune father will be weak in some way, or wounded, or unable to live in the world, or unable to cope, or they may be suicidal, or they could also be deceptive in some way, and you don't see them clearly, blinded as we are by the Sun Neptune rays. We're seeing them through the shimmering light on water, and we're seeing something distorted, and we don't realize it. So sometimes Sun Neptune is also about coming to grips with the way that things are, as opposed to the kind of fantasies and projections that we've perhaps put onto solar figures. There's mystique, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing. It depends. Addiction that comes into our life because we desire something higher, but it's not the real thing. So there's also this question about Neptune can be this very mystical planet that points toward divine union, but it can also point to poor substitutes and delusional substitutes. This is why you also have to be careful with Sun Neptune. Sun Neptune can point to like really elevated sort of otherworldly teachers, whether they're men or women or anything. Teachers coming into your life, even in the form of like something that becomes a teacher. But then there's the question, am I putting them up on a pedestal? If we have to be really careful with Sun Neptune, you put someone on a pedestal, they're likely to fall off from it eventually. I was watching a White Christmas with my daughters, and they were dancing around the living room. It was really sweet. And this was something that we've done since I was a little boy. We watched White Christmas around Christmas time, usually a few times. Just is so much good singing and dancing in that movie. But there's this part, where he says, Bing Crosby is talking to Rosemary Clooney, I think it is, and he says, it's kind of high up there. This knight in shining armor up on a high charger. You put me up here, and it's pretty high up here, pretty lonely. I'm not sure I'm not going to fall off. And of course, if you've never seen the movie, watch it. But that symbol ends up coming back around at the end of the movie in a sweet way. But it's a great line. It's a simple line, but it's a timeless one, because the people that we put up on high horses, whether it's ourselves that we're putting on a high horse or somebody else, they're bound to fall off, because we're all human, and none of us are perfect. It's very rare that we meet the Sun Neptune in the ideal saint or sage. More likely that we deal with people who are imperfect or flawed. And it's really difficult to find really good teachers in our lives if we expect out of our teachers something inhuman, or some kind of perfection. Very rare that we have our Dalai Lamas, or our in the Bhakti tradition, it's our acharyas, the people that are like luminaries. And even luminaries, they still have their faults or flaws. They still, so at any rate, we have to be aware of that. And there was a movie that was made some time ago, and I think there was a talk that I did on it. I think it was called Kumara. And it was also talking about how it was kind of like the guru industry, and churning out gurus. And this guy, he like faked that he was a guru. He completely faked it, and showed how gullible people were. And it was very eye-opening movie. I thought it was really interesting. But one of the things that I had to learn, when I was going through a lot of years drinking ayahuasca and working with different shamans, was that in the beginning, I really put a lot of the shamans that I worked with up on this pedestal. Like, oh my God, I was so impressed with what they were able to do and the kind of space they were able to hold and navigate and orchestrate. But over time, after a few disappointments, I realized like I have to find teachers in my life that aren't going to, um, that where I don't lose my faith the second that I find a chink in the armor, and that's a big thing with Sun Neptune, especially around our fathers. So there can be some of that stuff that happens as well with Sun and Neptune. You think of the alchemical gold moments where you just feel like you're reaching an understanding. It might be sort of ephemeral, or there may be a sense in which it's hard to grasp or quantify what you've learned, or some shift that's happening within you, but there's a sense that something golden has formed inside of your consciousness, even if it's only temporary. I think that comes. I have moments where I suddenly go, wow, I can see how I've grown up in some way. And it just feels like for a minute everything's glimmering inside of me like it's a little piece of gold. Those moments are, few and far between. They don't last very long either, but Sun Neptune can certainly be a moment of alchemical gold making. There's a quality of selflessness that comes with the Sun and Neptune, of sacrificing ourselves for something, and that feeds in a little bit to the Mars energy that's present this week. You certainly have to be careful during all of this as well of people, especially people in positions of authority or power, the Sun, potentially engaging in acts of deception or um, yeah, something like that. There's a little bit of that too, again, with the Mercury being with the South Node combust. Like, um, it wouldn't surprise me, for example, if we saw men or solar figures or leaders of any kind going through something related to drugs or secrets or deception or something like that. Um, or if that just that almost Dionysian thing that happens with the Sun Neptune, where something gets sort of torn apart. And that's something that else that can happen is your sense of purpose, your sense of where you're going and what you know to be real is somehow dismembered and dissolved. That's a Sun Neptune quality. All right. Well, here's some people that I thought you guys might find interesting to hear about that have the Sun in a square to Neptune in their natal chart. Paul McCartney. And by the way, I wasn't able to find as many women. I didn't have a ton of time though. So if you guys find more to add to this list, please do. I'd love to hear what you guys come up with as well. Um, Paul McCartney, great example of a very iconic artist. You have some other iconic artists like James Joyce, if you ever read his books, very Sun Neptune, especially Ulysses, if you ever read that. Kurt Vonnegut is another one, very otherworldly and sort of strange, Slaughterhouse. What was that book called? Slaughterhouse something. I can't remember what it was called. Someone remind me. I had to read it in grad school a long time ago, but I thought that in terms of artists, another one was Frank Zappa. Like that makes sense if you know if you know Frank Zappa. Brian Wilson, who is another one. Carl Jung. There's some really great thinkers as well that embody almost like mystical types of thinking. Carl Jung is one of them. Joseph Campbell is another one. I thought it was interesting that that Stephen Forrest, famous evolutionary modern astrologer, has Sun Neptune in a square. That makes sense to me if you've ever heard him speak, and just the following that he's developed as well. He is something of an astrological guru, I would say. And I'm not I'm not putting him up on a pedestal, but he's a really well renowned teacher of a mystical topic like astrology. I thought there were some other interesting connections that I made, like Joan Didion is another interesting artist who, what was the name of her book? Was she the one who wrote The Year of Magical Thinking? I can't remember if it was Joan Didion or not. I had to read her too when I was in my MFA program. And yeah, she's the Sun Neptune character. Marianne Williamson, that makes a lot of sense if you think of her. And Lady Gaga, all Sun Neptune people. There's also film. The Sun-Neptune has a lot to do with film and movie stars, and sometimes also the tragedy of movie stars and things like that. But Roger Ebert, there's one. He was, of course, a longtime film critic who, kind of, he also dies of a degenerative disease, I believe it was. Am I right about that? I can't remember. Which would be fitting if it was for Sun-Neptune, because that can be kind of that degenerative dissolution. I remember his face changed toward the end of his life. He was my favorite movie critic of all time. I always read what he wrote before I went and saw a movie, if I was unsure. River Phoenix, there's another one. Iconic movie star who had drug problems. There's some occult figures like George Gurdjieff. I thought it was really interesting that Edward Norton, a movie star, has the Sun Square Neptune, because he's played a number of roles like Primal Fear, Fight Club, The Illusionist, where there's a real mystique or a level of deception, or you don't see things clearly around who he is or what's going on. I just think it's interesting that a lot of the times you'll see the roles that certain stars play that they become known for fit with something in their charts very well. Certainly he has a few roles that fit with the Sun-Neptune. Can you think of any others? Let's see. I thought Lady Gaga was a really nice example. I mentioned Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. He was also Sun-Neptune, but it was like a, genius, but also like troubled. And he had real issues with his dad as well, who was involved in his career. But then, and to mention people who also have like they are known for their intelligence and their mind, like they're intellectual figures. They're sort of luminaries, and they have this far-reaching, almost cult-like following. That and I don't mean that in a negative sense. But like Carl Jung, but you can have those all across the board. They don't have to just be mystics. They can be political figures. For example, Rush Limbaugh has a Sun square to Neptune. I thought Marianne Williamson is a bit like that too, where she has that kind of cult following, and she's kind of a political figure, but she's also this kind of spiritual self-help guru. Ella Fitzgerald, I thought, was a really stunning example. I don't know, for me, Ella Fitzgerald has that just numinous, otherworldly, artistic quality to her, and I thought, well, it was a really good match for Sun-Neptune. Anyway, so that's what I've got for you guys today. Remember, this transit lasts through the week. You'll notice it intensifying for sure on Wednesday, but you can feel it all the way through Friday. As it's doing it, you've got this activation of Mars energy through the square. Squares are of the nature of Mars, and also through the sun trining Mars itself, both in fire signs. So a lot of action here, but fueled with that kind of alchemical, numinous Neptune-Sun combination. Let's make some gold, Make sure we don't get up on a high horse, and make sure that we don't put other people on high horses. The likelihood is that they'll get knocked off. Watch for healing around solar figures, and watch for that kind of that otherworldly inspiration to guide or motivate our actions this week. All right, that's what I've got for you guys. How are you noticing this play out in your own chart or in your own lives, or where are you seeing it in the news? I always love saying this is what to watch for, because I don't watch the news barely at all. That's just me. I often rely on you guys to tell me what's happening in the world that has sort of matched with the transits. Sometimes, I'm aware of it, but other times you guys always surprise me with ways that you piece it together and see it, for those of you who are, looking at headlines more. And so I always appreciate that. Last but not least, don't forget, Kickstarter's running till the end of the year. We're almost to 691. We're closing in on that. We have until the end of the year. So I really appreciate your support. Pick up 50% off to one of my online programs. Come study astrology with me next June when my next classes start. I'd love to see you guys there. If you're in one of my classes, come take my advanced programs. They also start in June. All right, that's what I've got. Take it easy, everybody. Bye.